Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and glad to have this hearing today. Number of things I wanted to respond, and maybe some other occasion or some other format we'll have a chance in a respectful, of course, way to go back and forth on some of these points that you raise. First, I would say, before I even get to my opening statement, we know definitively the answer to the question whether or not the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act paid for itself. The answer is no. And don't take my word for it. Sitting right at that chair, our guest at a previous hearing, Douglas Holtz-Aiken, clearly a well-respected right-of-center economist, his exact quote, so I don't misquote him here, 5 years, when asked the question whether or not, I believe I was the one who asked him the question whether or not tax cuts entirely pay for themselves. He said, quote, "No serious economist would make such a claim." Now, tax cuts do have some stimulative effect, more of an effect when they're targeted in the right way versus others. But no, of course, they never entirely pay for themselves. Heck, if they did, then why not have a tax rate of 0.00001% if we thought that they were, oh wait, some of my friends might take me up on that, oh geez. I think I just won the 2024 Republican nomination. But of course they don't pay entirely for themselves. Money does not grow on trees. And the reality is another witness testified to this, if people recall. I like to do callbacks for those longtime viewers of our hearings. When you add up the two Bush tax cuts, 2001 and 2003, and then of course they were extended jointly under split rule, President Obama and the Republican-led Congress, and then you add in the TCJA, we are missing $10 trillion. So when you look at that national debt figure, recognize that where some of that debt comes from. I'd also point out, since a favorite president of mine, JFK, was invoked, it is true, he did push for a tax cut. I'm not sure my Republican friends would like us to go back to what the marginal rates were after those tax cuts. They were significantly higher than the taxes we have today. Indeed, we have some of the lowest tax rates right now that we have ever had since having this modern system of taxation. Now, part of the title for this hearing is, quote, "Reigniting American Growth." I have good news. It is already happening. More than 13 million jobs created over the last 2.5 years, the lowest unemployment rate since the 1960s. More jobs have been created in this presidential term than any other single term in American history. On inflation, with the latest data that came out last week, inflation has now dropped for 11 consecutive months. It is still higher than what we would like it to be, but my goodness, are we in a different world than our friends in Europe? Their situation is much worse on inflation, without the signs that it's necessarily going to get better soon. On this point, I had a German parliamentarian, a member of the Bundestag, in my office last week, a good ally of the United States. He was talking about the situation they're facing in terms of inflation and expressing the wish that inflation was in Germany what it is in the United States right now, with dropping so heavily. So once again, as I've said here many times, the United States continues to lead the worldwide recovery coming out of COVID, and we need to make sure we don't do anything that would jeopardize that. Now, finally, let me say on the other half of what I think this hearing will be, the trade picture, I'm glad that we're having a hearing talking about trade. We are 4% of the world's population. Sometimes, it's very easy, being Americans, it's very easy to forget that 96% of the world lives outside our shores. Mark Twain once said, America's two best friends in the world are the Atlantic and the Pacific. So sometimes we can have a more parochial view. The reality is, being only 4% of the world's population, we do need trade. However, I think it is clear, and in some ways, there might be Democrats and Republicans who agree on this. I think there have been trade deals over the last quarter century that have not paid close enough attention to the needs and concerns of American workers, especially America's blue-collar workers. Um, there was a victory on that front, a bipartisan one that is, not really talked about that often, and that was the revision of NAFTA, USMCA, a deal in which, for the first time, you saw a majority of organized labor in support. It got over 400 votes in the House of Representatives. The same number of House Democrats and House Republicans voted for USMCA. So it shows that this isn't just rhetoric. I am a believer that we can have trade agreements that are in our national security interest, but also balance the need for growth and the balance to drive good prices for American consumers with also protecting the interests of American workers. So with that, I will yield back and look forward to hearing from our witnesses.